ili možete da se pritisnete taster raise hand i ukoliko želite da budete uključeni i da vas vidimo i čujemo, ne samo da upišete svoje pitanje ili komentar, to možete učiniti na taj način tako što kliknete na dugme raise hand. A za ostale sve tehnička pitanja slobodno, ako nešto nije jasno ili imate problem, pišite u čatu. Ja bih još samo rekla da se ova diskusija realizuje u okviru projekta Europe for Citizens Evropske unije, kod nas u Srbiji i u preostalim zemljama regiona, kao i zajedno sa partnerima iz Italije, Poljske i Belgije, dakle nas 9 partnera u ovom konzorcijumu. A današnjoj diskusiji su prethodile konsultacije koje smo održali juče sa predstavnicima omladine, sa mladim osobama koji imaju između 16 i 24 godine. I oni su itekako imali šta da kažu o društvenim mrežama i u ovoj temi kojoj danas mi razgovaramo, a cilj takvog okupljanja mladih osoba je da ohrabrimo učešće njih mladih u društveno-političkim dešavanjima i da promovišemo inkluzivno kreiranje politika. I zbog toga upravo sa nama je i Irina Radosavljević, koju sam predstavila na početku, koja će nam preneti utiske i zaključke sa jučerašnje rasprave. Irina, izvoli.
Dobar dan. Ja bih odmah prešla sa time da ću navesti pozitivne i negativne aspekte koje smo mi smatrali da su najbitniji da se istaknu sa društvenih mreža. Kao pozitivne aspekte naveli smo dostupnost informacija na društvenim mrežama, zatim samo podsticanje aktivizma kod mladih, pogotovo za humanitarne akcije, i zatim poveznost i zabava koje su, ajde da pomenemo tu pandemiju, pogotovo bili pokazani za vreme ove godine. Kao negativne aspekte, najhitnije stvari koje želimo da promenimo su širenje lažnih vesti i netačnih informacija na društvenim mrežama, kao i bezbednost na internetu i elektronsko nasilje. Preći ću odmah na rezolucije, na naše predloge za rezolucije, koje sad da biste mogli u što većoj meri da nam pomognete da realizujemo. Kada su u pitanju netačne informacije, smatram da je bilo dobro da se profili sa većim brojem pratilaca, sa većom platformom kontrolišu, na način na koji se utvrđuju autentičnost njihovih izvora, jer bilo bi neprikladno da mi njima ukidamo slobodu govora i cenzurišemo ih za sve, već samo da se utvrde autentičnost literature koju oni koriste kada šire neke informacije. Zatim ono što nama da kažemo bitnije i što bismo voljeli da se što pre realizuje, to je da se izvori vesti sa televizija, novina i interneta priključe i na društvene mreže koje koriste mladi. Samim tim, kao što su, ajde navešću na primjer Instagram, i samim tim mladi imaju tačne i poverljive i validne izvore informacija koji su njima pristupačni i kojima bi oni mogli da pristupe bilo kom momentu svakodnevno. Način prikazivanja stvari informativnog karaktera za mlade mora da bude drugačije formulisan, jer ako biste samo napravili Instagram profil i stavili link, vesti mladi u taj link ne bi ulazili, već smatram da bi bilo dobro da se na tim platformama taj tekst odmah prikaže u vidu nekog posta, da se malo skrati format i ono što je bitnije da se modernizuje vokabular. Kada kažem modernizuje vokabular, ne mislim da se koriste neki žargoni ili vulgarizmi, već da se samo neka terminologija što bolje približi mladima, da oni što bolje mogu da razumiju materijal koji koriste. Mislim da je svrha svega toga da se mladi ostaju prihvaćeni i prilagođeno, da znaju da su čuti i da naše mišljenje je validno nekome. Takođe, bilo bi dobro ako bi u formi tih platformi na društvenim mrežama mogli da učestvuju i sami mladi, sastavljajući te tekstove za vesti. Ako pričamo o bezbednosti na internetu i elektronskom nasilju kao druga tema koju bismo hteli da promenimo, glavna stvar koju bih navela jeste revizija politike privatnosti. Problem kod toga je što bilo koja platforma koja traži od nas bilo koje od naših podataka, traži da prihvatimo politiku privatnosti. Mi to uglavnom kliknemo bez da pročitamo, ne samo mladi, već i stariji, iz razloga što je to jedan kompleksan tekst od 15 do 30 strana, vrlo teškog rečnika za shvatanje i niko to zapravo ne čita. U tom tekstu se nalaze, ja sam ga pročitala, nalaze mnoge stvari koje ne bismo prihvatili da znamo da smo svesni, od personalizovanih reklama koje koriste naše podatke da bi nam približili marketinške neke ideje koje nas interesuju i prodaju naše podatke nekim drugim kompanijama kojima trebaju te podaci. Problem u tome je što posebni objektivni organi nisu u mogućnosti da vrše reviziju politike privatnosti, jer same mreže, odnosno te platforme, sa pravom postavljaju svoje uslove, koje mi ne moramo da prihvatimo, ali samim prihvatanjem nemamo pravo da menjamo. Druga stvar koju bih smatrala za bitnu jeste da se uvedu obavezna predavanja u planu i programu osnovnih škola, da se na nastavi informatike priča o bezbednosti na internetu, jer smatram da u ovo novo moderno doba se već u prvom razredu otprilike uzimaju telefoni u ruke i da mladi nisu svesni u šta zapravo ulazi i koliko to može biti opasno. Druga stvar jeste formiranje novog i državnog i nezavisnog regulatornog tela za elektronsko nasilje. Ako nije moguće ili nije potrebno formiranje novog, da se iskoriste kapaciteti i da se više podigne svest za postojeće regulatorne organe. Dala bih primer MUP, odnosno sektor za visokotehnološki kriminal, koji se time bavi, ali zbog drugih stvari koje ulaze u visokotehnološki kriminal, oni nemaju baš vremena da se bave samim nasiljem na internetu, a imaju kapacitet. Pored toga, značilo bi nam ako bismo mogli da uključimo REM, odnosno regulatorno telo za elektronske medije, da što više potencijala na televiziji u vidu reklama, emisija ili nekih priloga o tome, samo nasilje na internetu kao i bezbednost na internetu i šta mi zapravo prihvatamo kada ulazimo na neku društvenu mrežu i dijelimo svoje podatke. Samim tim u to uključujemo i roditelje, jer ih obrazujemo kao ciljnu grupu koja gleda televiziju. Samim tim obrazujemo i roditelje koji kasnije znaju kako da pomognu deci. Neka ključna pitanja na koja bih voljela da mi odgovorite i da mene i sve nas posavetujete jesu na koji način aktivirati vesti da se prilagode mladima, jer mi ne možemo očekamo od njih da oni preko noći samo se priključe, jer to je jedan proces i na koji način mi njima da objasnimo značaj da se prilagode mladima i da uključe mlade u sve to. Pored toga, kako da odredimo reviziju politike privatnosti, a da ostanemo pri upotrebi zakona, odnosno da ne kršimo zakon, da nađemo neku drugu rezoluciju, jer samo menjanje politike privatnosti nije moguće, ako ja ne grešim. I treća stvar jesu koje krovne ekspertske organizacije možemo da uključimo. Što od onih koje već postoje, to do otvaranja nekih novih ili radionica ili organizacija koje mogu da rade i sa mladima, da se to sve spreči i šta da se dešava kasnije ako se dogodi do nasilja, ako se desi nasilje. Što državne, što nezavisne organizacije, da se to što više potencira. Eto, to su neke ključne stvari koje smo mi mladi izveli kao najbitnije. Ja se nadam da je to bilo što jasnije, ja neću dužiti više.
Hvala puno, Irina. Ja sam razumela od nekih koleginica da imali smo možda mali smetnji u prevodu. Are you all happy with the translation? Were there any interruptions? Could you understand Irina well?
I can repeat it in English if it's a problem.
I could summarize if that would help out the participants, but Paul?
It did not work. The translation was too scattered, so I practiced a lot my Serbian, so it was more or less okay.
Okay. Yeah, Paul Butcher, probably. Okay, I will...
it's a little choppy. I can make it out. I can more or less follow, but...
okay, that's good
there's
because...
a bit of an echo or something.
I can repeat the questions in English if it's a thing.
Let me just see if we arrange the problem with the translation, and if not, I might then, if it's still scattered, and I see that among our participants we have some third from non-Serbian participants, we could maybe switch to English if it's, I guess more people speak English in total than Serbian, but let me just give me one more minute, please, to consult my colleagues. We need to resolve this translation issue now. Sorry for this interruption, but while I'm doing this, you could maybe, Irina, into these three questions that you want to ask, or like a food for reflection to other participants, just to repeat it in English, please.
Okay, I'm sorry if I'm maybe not using some professional terms. The key points and the key questions I would like to have the answers to are: in what way can we activate the news from TV, newspapers, and internet to participate in social media, to make their platforms on social media and adjust themselves to younger population? Second question is how to make some changes in privacy policies when and still not break the law, if I can say that, because we cannot include some objective regulatory bodies. It has to be from the platform. And the third question is what organizations can we include that can talk about cyberbullying and safety on the internet from some, how do you say it, kako da kažem, nezavisne organizacije?
Independent regulatory organizations, let's say. I mean,
okay,
objective or...
Independent regulatory organizations, either to make new ones or to include and work more on the ones that already exist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks a lot, Irina. I think we will continue in English. Unfortunately, I see from my colleagues, they check the quality of translation and it seems that it's still scattered. So if you're all okay, you could still listen to Serbian translation, and hopefully the internet connection with our translator will get better. And yeah, let's be spontaneous. It's what we should do now. So now we'll turn to Nevena, to whom I'd like to reflect as a lawyer and digital media expert. I'd like to that you reflect a bit on what Irina said, if you want to, and to tell us a bit more about the legal framework in Serbia in this field, and what solutions and proposals does your foundation, the Share Foundation, advocate when it comes to regulating the digital platforms?
Thank you, Sena. And thank you very much, Irina, for your presentation. And it is always really nice to hear what young people have to say on these topics, because you are the ones that are going to use them for a long, long time, and you should advocate and build policies in this regard. There are a lot of useful things that Irina said, but in order to summarize it, it will take us like a couple of days. But I will try to be really short and say that everything that Irina mentioned is, from my point of view, in the field of media literacy. At this stage, we should definitely move forward and go into the direction of trying to make people be aware of these issues, to know what they, where they can find relevant information, and to educate themselves. Irina also mentioned one really important thing. I think at this stage, the biggest gap is between young people, kids, and their parents as adults. Parents are not aware at all what's going on in digital environment, and kids are way ahead of them. And that big gap is the most problematic thing at this stage. That will change for sure in future years, but we should address that as a really serious issue, because parents being unaware of the things that are going on, they can't influence their kids, they can't educate their kids. So that's why we need to put media literacy, as Irina mentioned, as obligatory in schools, and to educate not only young people, kids, their teachers, their parents, and everybody. And that sounds like a huge task, but as soon as we start, we will get there. And as for the couple of main points at the end that Irina mentioned, I think that organizations like Share Foundation, that has been dealing with the human rights in digital environment for the last 8 years, has a lot of material that can be of help. That doesn't mean that we have all the answers, but we are trying really hard to at least provide proper information to citizens as well as young people. So I completely encourage establishing a lot of organization that will deal with these issues. On the other hand, as for the privacy policies, we are completely aware that all the big platforms and social media platforms are the ones that are let's say the richest one, the one that have the biggest revenue in the world. They're in top 5, top 10 companies. So they have a great power. But in regard to that power, also European Union replied with the GDPR, and that is one of the regulations that can help a single citizen to use all the rights within it in order to try and make some changes. I won't go deep into it because that's a huge topic, but I will definitely advise everybody who has worries about their privacy policies to educate themselves in that direction and see what they can do to try to practice their rights. And as for the traditional media trying to adapt to young people, I think that will come. I don't know how quickly, but that's definitely something that will change and is changing at the very moment, because traditional media are completely aware they don't have an audience anymore. They need to reach new audience. They need to change their business models. They need to change the way they spread information, and they need to find their place in this huge digital environment. Which also is going to lead me to my presentation as such, and I'm going to ask Sena to remind me about timing.
Yes, I know that it's your feedback on Irina's comments are very valuable, and if you could squeeze this in some 2 minutes, just a very short brief info on this,
no problem.
Question.
So one of the first tasks that I worked with the Share Foundation when I joined in 2014 was the new law on media. And it was very essential to us to advocate that platforms, social media, forums, social media, and other similar things are not included in traditional definition of media. And we were quite successful in that. And that is really important, that media as such, as defined as such within the law, is not covered in these platforms that I mentioned, because that would be an impossible task, not only impossible task, but that would be a quite hit on freedom of expression. So according to our law, we have definition of media, and that law is applying to media, the traditional one as we know as such, which are newspapers and their online platforms on the internet, television, radio, etc. But Facebook, let me simplify that, is not considered as media according to our law on media. That led me to the thing that it's really important to emphasize. It doesn't mean that people who are spreading information, who are sharing something, are not liable for their words. So there are different laws, different mechanisms, and everybody who is spreading information, who is sharing something, can be liable for their use of free speech. So that is the most important thing that I want to emphasize, because people think that internet is somewhere there, that if they put something there, they're not liable, etc. That's not true. So people should really think thoroughly before spreading anything on the internet, because it has its own implications. It is difficult, and it's not that easy to go to that direction and make sure that you have your rights, if somebody violates your rights, to cover it as it would be in offline world, but there are mechanisms, and it's a bit of more struggle than it would be in let's say offline world. I'm going to stop now, but I'm sure there will be another things to talk about once everybody presents.
Thanks a lot, Nevena. Thanks for these explanations and clarifications. Victor, we'll now turn to you. Newsnet is, in my view, or that's how I see it, it's in a way instigating and promoting critical thinking and fighting disinformation with humor. You are also very savvy of digital media as well, so could you tell us your perspective on this issue, what we've talked about and what our two panelists commented on?
Thank you. Hello to everyone. My name is Victor, and like Sana said, I work for Newsnet. It's a website that actually makes fake news. So I guess this is the reason why I'm invited today. And first of all, I have to say that I think the situation is definitely not serious enough if you are calling me to such a seminar. That definitely, since I am here, that freedom of speech on the internet is not jeopardized, and we shouldn't be afraid that it will be jeopardized at any point in the future just because I am invited here. Otherwise, you would invite some experts, and that's why I'm a little bit worried to see Nevena from Share here, because she's an expert, and that tells me that it can go somehow wrong. But then again, I see also members from the European Union here, and this also tells me that the situation is good, because we all know that European Union only shows up when everything is okay. So I guess this is the reason that I am invited, because I write for one website that actually makes up news as we go along, and I have to make a little bit explanation that we don't actually make fake news, that we actually create news. So this is a big difference. We don't lie to our audiences. We are openly fake, unlike some other media who creates fake news in order to trick the viewers. When we started doing this some 10 years ago, we never actually considered, we never actually thought about freedom of speech on the internet. And to be quite honest, we don't do that today as well, because it comes as sort of a common sense for us. What can we say and what can't we say on the internet, because we treat it in a way like we treat all other media and like we treat all other conversations. And we apply common sense to it, and then we know if what we write will hurt somebody, or what we write will disinform somebody, or what we write will offend somebody. Just as we know somehow when we speak to somebody, when we say something, that what we say will hurt somebody or offend somebody. So we try to treat the internet as well as we treat all other interactions, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's some other media, for example. We treat it like we treat television or print media or radio. So we have this common sense to tell us what's acceptable and what goes beyond some boundaries. Now, whether it's boundaries of decency or boundaries of common sense, that's the other key issue. And this was, like I said, 10 years ago when we started. In internet terms, it's quite a long time ago. It was so long time ago, actually, that when we think about it, I don't know if you remember, but that was the time when our parents didn't have Facebook. So that was that long ago. And we are sort of like, let's say, I still belong to the younger generation. So we still belong to this people who are more experienced on the internet. We were on the internet as soon as it showed up. And our parents actually came to the internet through social media, which is, I think, different than us. And their entry field was through Facebook, and their entry field was social media, which is strange when you think about it. And it would be like today, our entry through internet would be through TikTok. So we wouldn't understand anything. In a way, we have to understand older people that they don't know how to use, I think, internet and social media, and they are not that experienced like we are. I know we are talking about younger people today, but I'm in a way not so much worried about younger people as I am worried about older people who are mostly victims of false information. And I think so far it seems to me that the only solution to the problem is just to sort of like continue, like Irina said, and Nevena, to spread the awareness that the problem exists. Because if we try to solve the problem by implementing some regulations, I think we come up to the ancient problem of who is going to implement the regulations and under what circumstances, and it would all become very biased and controlled, and it could go and it could turn out to be much worse. The consequences could be much worse than what we have today. So I guess that if it happens that EU, for example, is the one who controls the internet, then I can at least say that we here in Serbia will be out of EU's touch for at least a couple of decades to come. So at least we will have free internet some time before we enter EU.
Thanks, Victor. Yeah, well, this question of regulation or self-regulation is an open question everywhere, I guess. And thanks for introducing a bit of humor in our sober times, and for also introducing the aspect of and perspective of the older people. And now we turn to Paul Henri Presset from the EU delegation in Serbia, whom I would like to ask about his point of view from, let's say, as an EU representative of why the EU is also engaging more in, with more streamlined action in this field, and what are the avenues and perspectives that it's now considering doing when it comes to the freedom of expression online.
Thank you, Sena. Good morning, everyone. And let me first, thank you for convening me to that conference, and to thank the previous speaker, Irina, Nevena, and Victor, for switching to English. The translation was very bad indeed, and appreciate that you made the effort so that we can all understand. First of all, so yes, I'm Paul. I'm here. I'm the EU head of communication in Serbia. So let's say, just to frame that, I'm not working in Brussels on all of these initiatives directly. So I'm not going to tell you groundbreaking news of plans in preparation. We would not be entitled to it, but also I don't have it. But I can maybe I'll try in a second part to say a few things about these the EU initiatives that are already there and those who are in preparation. First of all, I would like to comment, maybe to make a reference that also would answer one of the comment from Victor that used sarcasm in some occasion, but to raise a very valid point. When you entitled this conference on addressing freedom of expression online, and I think it's not about addressing freedom of expression in a way. Sometimes, often addressing is when you address a problem, and this is not a problem of freedom of expression. The EU definitely embraces the freedom of expression. It's within our treaty, it's within our charter for human rights, protection of freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And the issue, however, is with this, well, we often call it new ways of communicating, but it's not very new anymore. But it's the power and the diversity of mechanisms to express opinions, to express oneself through internet, which has basically disrupted the way that people can talk to each other and that communicate. So it's in itself, it's not a problem at all. It is something that the EU values very much and recognizes the power of internet to improve freedom of expression. However, the issue is that some internet has also allowed for other negative mechanisms which hinder freedom of expression. When
Sloboda izražavanja, znači kad Irina govori.
No, I hear the translation.
Evo sad slušam prevod.
Just a second, please. Let's resolve this issue. I think, yeah, you can continue.
Okay.
Mislim da možete da nastavite.
Sorry, just a second. There's one issue.
Imamo problem.
Let me just see why.
Da vidimo. Anesa, svi moraju da budu na floru, govornici moraju da budu na floru, a možda je on na kanalu English, na pogrešnom kanalu.
Please, in this option interpretation, you need to choose the original audio. You're at channels right now, because you stayed at channels, probably. Is it okay now?
There's no interpretation option now at the moment.
Sad i nema opcije prevoda.
No, it's okay. I think now we're fine with that. Logistics. Sorry, Paul.
Fine. No, it's good. It's good indeed. So the point I was trying to make is that so it's not an issue of freedom of expression and no way to hinder it at all. It's precisely to reinforce it by trying to fight negative practices on the internet. When Irena mentioned online bullying, but there's also disinformation that Victor and Nevena spoke about, defamation, health issue, privacy issues, as Irena also mentioned. So, and these are not new things either. They didn't come with the internet. And if we refer, for example, to the European Convention on Human Rights, which also protects for the whole of Europe freedom of expression, in its Article 10, there's already included some, let's say, some restrictions. It's talk about restrictions such as in interest of national security, territorial integrity, but also health, morals, protection of reputation and rights of others. So in a way, these issues 50 years ago, they were already there for traditional media. And now there has been whole legislative framework in all over the world in different countries to deal with these aspects. The idea that people are alone and detached from society on internet and can talk about everything disrupted this framework, but which still has to be there. So that the introduction I wanted to make was to show that the EU responsibility here as a guardian of human rights, in his own treaty, protection of human rights, is to not control the internet, as Victor said, I think using irony, but to help to facilitate an environment which will make freedom of expression stronger. And the state, when we talk about freedom of expression, the responsibility of the state or state actor or public actor like the European Union is first and foremost to refrain from interference on censorship, on freedom of expression, but also to ensure a favorable environment for inclusive and pluralistic debate. And this is what the European Union tries to do. It had initiative, so it recognized all the threats that all of these negative aspects that I mentioned earlier can have on EU and all of the democratic societies we have. And it started working on developing a set of either, let's say, strategies, incentives, pushing actors themselves for self-regulations. So I think it started in 2018 when when the European Union published a communication on the European approach for fighting disinformation. I just wanted to focus here on disinformation, which has been highlighted as an important problem, but it's indeed the online bullying are also very important challenges. So the way that the European Union has worked on disinformation, starting in 2018, yes, with this communication on tackling online disinformation, a European Union approach, and the different streams that it went was, first of all, to help self-regulations by online platforms and advertisers, to which major actors like Facebook, Twitter, Mozilla adhere to, and to develop a set of mechanisms to do fact-checking, to promote fact-checking, to promote notices when information is doubtful, like you see more and more on Twitter, for example, and work with reliable sources to do the fact-checking, etc. I also wanted to to reassure maybe Victor that in the definition that European Union gave to disinformation, the use of irony, of comical way of expression is not disinformation at all, and this is perfectly fine. The consideration, the way that the European Union considers disinformation is when you, on purpose, wrongfully try to abuse the public by displaying information that are known and that are known by the writer to be wrong. So for the European Union, it had a series of initiatives, as I said, to favor auto-regulation, to develop media literacy, and so initiatives funded by the EU and including in Serbia here, where with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Culture are being developed and actually have been finalized some guidebook for school on media literacy that have been finalized and will be disseminated to all schools of Serbia. And here again, it's to give tools not for the European Union to control the internet, not to hinder freedom of speech, but to give the tool for people to be able to fight by themselves and to navigate themselves through the information. And so that was one part of the aspect. The other, where as mentioned, GDPR, so to protect yourself, to protect individual data from that can float around the internet. Maybe I'm starting to be a little bit long. I just wanted to mention as well a new initiative on which I cannot say much at this stage because it's not yet adopted. This is the European Democracy Action Plan, which the European Union has been working on also in this context of COVID, where disinformation has played a role against the public health of individuals. And this European Democracy Action Plan aims at tackling spread of disinformation, reinforcing media freedom and media pluralism. This is another aspect that should have mentioned, is the the fact that with the development of internet, people have the impression that you have more sources of information, you can be more informed, but actually the revenues of media needs finances to work. Studies have shown that, and I have all the data, but they are still very relevant, that between 2010 and 2014, at the time of the boom of internet and media on internet, revenues from in Europe, revenues for print media diminished by 13 million euros, while their revenues from online sources increased by 3 billion euros. So you can see the economic pressure that are put on journalists to prepare and provide information. It's cut overall 10 billion euros in 4 years, 10 billion euros of revenues less. This hinders quality of information, pluralism of information that you can receive. So that's the second one. So media freedom and media pluralism are to be tackled or improved by the European Democracy Action Plan, but also election integrity, pressures on civil society across Europe and beyond, and also the international dimension, so the use of disinformation for, let's say, foreign policy. Mm-hmm. And what I mentioned, I believe, are all very well concerned very much Serbia as well. It's recognized by the media strategy, the new media strategy also of Serbia, the problem of disinformation, of media freedom, of the economic problems for media. And this is also why the European Union has, with Serbia and the relevant ministries, some actions to develop media literacy for all generations of Serbs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I will stop here. Sorry if I may have been a bit long.
Thank you, Paul. You provided a comprehensive overview of both the legal framework and the actions in course. Paul Butcher from the EPC, you are an expert in the field that we're talking about, so I would like just you to comment or add to what has previously been said. What would you like to add to this discussion? And just to say to our listeners that the translation is now doing perfectly well. We resolved this issue, so please you can switch to this translation in Serbian if you don't feel entirely comfortable in English. Paul, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sena. It's been a great discussion. We've touched all sorts of different angles, so I'm just going to try and draw a few connections between them. First of all, let me start by saying I'm glad this event is online, because I'm not sure how welcome Scottish people like myself are in Belgrade after last week's football game. I should clarify, I don't watch football. I didn't even know the match was happening, but I found out about it afterwards, thanks to Twitter. Because one half of my timeline was ecstatic, and the Serbs and Bosnians in my timeline rather less so. But I think this is a good place to start today's conversation, because without the internet, not only would I not be able to join this meeting today, but I wouldn't have known that Scotland has actually qualified for something in the first time in about 20 years. But this is important because I think sometimes in the policy debate, especially, we kind of fall into the trap of talking about the internet and social media as if it's all a bad thing, as if Facebook are the bad guys, and its impact on our lives is entirely negative, because it spreads disinformation and hate speech, and it takes away income from traditional media, and political campaigners can use it to manipulate people, and we spend all of our lives scrolling through our phones and so on. And this is all true. But of course, the internet and social media also have huge advantages, and there's a reason we spend so much time using it. And I think it's very important to recognize that. So today, while we're often thinking about the sort of negative sides perhaps as a result in politics, especially as a result of Trump and Brexit and the whole 2016 issue and the role that fake news played at that time, or questions about Facebook and social media having too much power, it's important to also keep the other side in mind. And I think that the EU approach so far has been trying to do exactly that. You know, it's not been about regulating social media really harshly to really crack down on what they're able to do. It's not about restricting internet freedoms. And I very much appreciated Victor's contribution, because I think the kind of material that Victor works on, you know, so humorous or parody or satirical material, that's super important. But there is this bit of gray area where you've got to be able to work out where does the line lie between something which is false for humorous intentions and false for manipulative intentions. And that's the big challenge. But I would also question one thing that Victor mentioned, which is that he suggested that maybe the free internet might be coming to an end if we're talking about regulation, government regulation and so on. But I would question whether the internet is really free now, because it's already the case that the social media platforms have such a huge influence over what we see. And this is why this question of self-regulation, which Paul from the Commission also brought up, is super relevant. So the EU's approach so far has been generally to encourage the social media platforms, not just to regulate themselves more, but to be more responsible in general, to take more responsibility for their actions. And I think that the feeling so far has been that this hasn't been successful, that Facebook and Twitter and so on have made some changes and they've made a bit of progress, but they're still kind of not doing enough. And for that reason, there now needs to be some more powerful regulation, basically to force the platforms to be more responsible. And that's partly the idea behind these new initiatives which are coming up now. Paul mentioned the Democracy Action Plan. There's also another one called the Digital Services Act, which will be announced at about the same time, which focuses more on competition policy and anti-monopoly actions and that kind of thing, and also how platforms use your data. So these proposals are coming up, and the idea behind them is partly to replace the existing voluntary framework with something which isn't entirely just enforcing regulation on the platforms, because we're still talking about co-regulation, so cooperation with the platforms. But it's a little bit more, how should I say, it has more framework to it. So rather than being entirely voluntary, there will be proper guidelines that platforms need to sign up to. And if they don't, there is some means of holding them accountable. Now, we'll see what the details are once the plans are published, which should be in the next, I think before the end of the year. But on disinformation specifically, I think the reason why this is so important is that disinformation isn't only widespread because you use social media, or manipulative actors can use social media to push manipulative content. There's also a demand for it. You know, people want to read alternative sources of information. They want to see a diverse media landscape. And that's one of the advantages of the internet. We can all find a corner of the internet that suits us and where which shares our views. But if that content is not based on high journalistic standards, and if it's not based on truth and accuracy, then we have a problem. So we need diverse journalism for a healthy democracy, but we also need good journalism. You know, it needs to be to a high standard. And that's one of the main goals of the Democracy Action Plan, I believe. And also media literacy, which has come up a lot in our discussion today and is super important. People need to know more about what they're seeing online and why they see it. And as Irina and Nevena both mentioned, digital education isn't just about young people. Older people need to be included in education plans too. It's actually older people who are more likely to spread disinformation or more likely to be influenced by it. And that's partly because they have lower levels of media literacy. Now, I wanted to say just a couple of quick words about how or what makes Serbia or the Western Balkans in a slightly different position, because this isn't something that we've touched on very much yet. I think that the Western Balkans are in some ways particularly vulnerable to disinformation. Now, some studies have suggested that media literacy is lower in the region than in other parts of Europe, and that could be part of the reason. But it's also because the political scenario in the Western Balkans is particularly ideal for people to push divisive, manipulative content. There are these very controversial questions, such as the name dispute for North Macedonia or the Kosovo issue, for example. This gets feelings very high, and that is one thing that disinformation actors can take advantage of. And not just European disinformation actors, but also some other actors from elsewhere, such as Russia or China or whatever. And we didn't mention it until now, and I think Sena was wondering how long it would take before it came up, but I have to mention COVID. COVID really changed the scenario when it comes to disinformation as well, because that demonstrated that harmful content isn't only politically manipulative, but it can also be health related. You know, a disinformation about drinking bleach or other kinds of remedies for COVID, that's also something which is a danger to public health. And so the restrictions on freedom of speech that we mentioned earlier, which are actually restrictions that have always existed, freedom of speech exists, but that doesn't mean that you can say things that cause harm. This seems to be the main guiding principle now. And I think that that's really good development, and I think things are going in the right direction. I'm glad that we're talking about media literacy so much, and that it's no longer just about how do we police Facebook. I think that the policy response now is beginning to recognize that we need to solve the big policy issues facing society. So it's not just about the regulatory approach to social media, but we also need to help to build a better media scene, a less polarized political landscape, and a better economic situation as well, because disinformation is also being motivated by profit and the fact that you can make money through advertising revenue. And if we don't fix those things, disinformation will basically always be there. And so I'll wrap up there because I know we want to save some time for questions and answers as well.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks to everyone for the really interesting discussion.
And thank you for, in a way, connecting the dots between our participants and their interventions, and for, in a way, wrapping up our discussion. I will now switch to Serbian. Dakle, malo ćemo produžiti ovu našu sesiju za, nadam se, 10 do 15 minuta, s obzirom da smo imali tehničkih smetnji. Sada možete da postavite vaše pitanje ili da date komentar. Ja ću da pročitam oni koji su već neko vreme od naših gledalaca i slušalaca. Imamo pitanje za Viktora i za Nevenu. Da li ste primetili neke promene u ponašanju, odnosno upotrebi društvenih medija od strane njihovih korisnika tokom pandemije? Dakle, evo ga, Viktor je nakon 54 minuta našeg razgovora, Paul Bučer je pomenuo i COVID kontekst, evo i naši slušaoci i gledalci su isto zainteresovani, dakle to je specifično pitanje za Viktora i Nevenu. Aleksandar Vukalović je dao komentar da je specifičnost Srbije u tome što je jedina na Balkanu uz podršku Zapada zaobišla tranziciju. To je komentar AC Vukalovića. Dakle, dok nam pristižu nova pitanja ili biste želeli da se uključite, u međuvremenu slobodno ohrabrujemo vas, mogu Viktor i Nevena da odgovore na ovo pitanje. Dakle, šta je pandemija promenila u pogledu navika korišćenja društvenih mreža, po vašem mišljenju? Može prvo Nevena.
Pa, prvo što bih rekla, or should I speak in English?
Može na srpskom, pošto radi prevod dobro.
Pa svakako smo se svi mnogo više posvetili društvenim mrežama, ako je to uopšte moguće za vreme korone. Ono što smo mi uspeli da ispratimo iz ugla Share fondacije jeste da kada god su te krizne situacije u pitanju, kao što smo imali i poplave 2014. godine, društvene mreže igraju jednu jako ključnu ulogu, zato što ljudi dele informacije, ukoliko vi se odlučite da verujete toj informaciji, naravno, možete dobiti neke informacije koje ne možete dobiti iz mainstream medija. Pa tako, na primjer, prvo što mi pada na pamet u toj situaciji jeste među nekim javnim ličnostima koji su prve obolele, one su delile svoja iskustva vezane za koronu, koje su, da kažemo, bile jako značajne za nekoga ko veruje tim javnim osobama iz razloga što dok se pričalo o tome da li je to smešni virus i slično, neke osobe su imale ozbiljne posledice, pa ste s te strane mogli da dobijete neke informacije. Tako da ta vrsta, i to je već pomenuto u ovoj diskusiji, ta vrsta informacija do kojih možemo da dođemo, do kojih inače ne bismo mogli, je jako, jako značajna. Tako da se kao i u drugim situacijama, možda sada mnogo češće, društvene mreže koriste da se podele informacije za koje nemaju, da kažemo, svoj put kroz tradicionalne medije.
Hvala. Viktore, tvoj komentar?
Dobro, da, Nevene je ovo lepo sve odgovorila. Ja bih dodao samo da ono što sam ja primetio je da se nekako raspoloženje na društvenim medijima menjalo u zavisnosti od toga kakva je situacija bila, u smislu da li je bio policijski čas ili su te mere bile ukinute pa su se ponovo vratile i naravno ljudi su sve vreme pratili i pokušavali da saznaju što više informacija o covidu i o tome kako se razvija celokupna situacija i koliko ljudi znaju da su uopšte zaraženi. I ja mislim da je mnogo toga doprinelo je na neki način nervozi, koliko vidim, zato što sama bolest, sama pandemija je takva da nekako ni sami naučnici ne znaju do sada sve informacije i onda kada to pomešate sa ljudima na društvenim mrežama koji su gladni informacija i vole da misle da kada dođu do neke informacije da je to i onda je šire dalje, onda tu nastane potpuni haos, tako da ja mislim da je to onako unosilo neku dodatnu nervozu, naročito u onom prvom talasu karantina. Sada su se, ja mislim, onako koliko vidim, ljudi malo navikli i malo blaže reaguju na neke stvari, mada opet vidim, sada kad je došao ovaj poslednji rekordni talas, da su opet tenzije malo pojačane i da su fitilji kraći, ako tako mogu da se izrazim, u smislu da ljudi nemaju baš mnogo strpljenja pa čak ni za šalu, ja mislim, toliko više kao ranije. Tako da, eto, to je ono što primećujem, da se ljudi mnogo lakše, mnogo brže uvrede, što ja mislim da je i logično, jer je situacija takva da je sve neizvesno, sve napeto i da dovoljno je samo neka provokacija, čak i benigna, da neko malo onako postane previše besan.
Hvala.
Izvinite, imam ja pitanje za Nevenu, ako nije problem, ako imamo vremena.
Imamo vremena, izvoli. Ja sam i mislila da vam dam sada priliku posle naših slušalaca, ali može, Irina.
Pa, veliki značaj tih, zbog čega je toliko veliki problem tih lažnih informacija kod mladih, je to što su mladima jedini izvor za informacije i vesti društvene mreže. Jer mi ne idemo na televiziju i u novine, tako da nama je jako bitno da te informacije koje dobijamo budu tačne. I kada nisu, ako ima puno lajkova, klikova i šerova, što se dešava kada nešto što je trač ili interesantno, mi poverujemo u to i formiramo svoje mišljenje na osnovu toga. Pa mene interesuje, ako bismo mi, da kažem, regulisali ili cenzurisali te stvari koje oni govore, da li bi to bilo narušavanje te slobode govora i ako nije, ko bi, da kažemo, koje regulatorno telo može da određuje šta je istina, šta nije, šta je tačna informacija i kako to da regulišu, pošto da bi na primjer Instagram, davao dozvolu nekom drugom telu da se bavi time i da fact checkuje.
Da, to smo dosta juče govorili na našoj raspravi. Da li je moguće uopšte stvoriti neko nezavisno, objektivno, regulatorno telo koje bi bilo, imalo autoritet.
Koje bi bilo objektivno i koje ne bi posle prelazilo u politiku ili u neku manipulaciju i ko ima dozvolu da kaže šta je laž, a šta nije i da je Instagram opet dozvoli da se neko meša u sve to.
Da, mi mladi, obično idealisti i malo možda naivni neki pogled na svet, ali opet idealizam je poželjan kad si mlad. Može Nevena, ali imaš komentar, molim te.
Pa naravno, ovo je jako teško pitanje, ali ja bi se prvo vratila na to šta je istina. Za mene je jedna istina, za Irinu je druga istina, za Senu je treća, ali opet moramo da se vratimo na neke osnove postulate i kao što je Paul pomenuo, sloboda izražavanja nije apsolutno pravo. Ona može biti ograničena u određenim slučajima. Jako je, sve se svodi na to što mi advokati prosto tako i gledamo kroz tu prizmu. U odnosu na svaki poseban slučaj. Ali vezano konkretno znam da Facebook je počeo da koristi fact-checking, da kažemo, na lokalu organizacije, koje prosto se uključuju u taj ceo sistem i proveravaju neke stvari. Mislim da mi uopšte nismo svesni koja količina informacija se u sekundi deli na samom internetu i moramo biti svesni da je to iz moje perspektive nemoguće regulisati. Ne samo što je nemoguće, mislim da je i nepoželjno regulisati. Ja kada čujem reč cenzura, ja se prosto naježim. Meni je cenzura kao nešto najgore što može da se desi vezano sa slobodu izražavanja. Cenzura nije ukoliko je to legitimno ograničeno pravo trećeg lica da bi se zaštitilo neko pravo drugog lica. Ali jednostavno mislim da je dug put do toga da mi prvenstveno moramo da pronađemo istinu našu i u skladu sa njom da živimo. Sad je ovo malo filozofski, ali ipak je Irina meni postavila jako teško pitanje. Pa onda da vidimo šta i kako ćemo u skladu sa tim i da se ponašamo. Mi moramo da znamo da filtriramo informacije, mi moramo da znamo kako čitamo informacije i na koji način mi želimo da poklonimo poverenje toj nekoj objektivnoj istini koja je nama predstavljena. Da li je ona objektivna, subjektivna i tako dalje. Tako da mislim da je rešenje u nama samima, nažalost, ali svakako je nešto na čemu treba raditi, pokušavati pronaći mehanizme. Ja nisam ni za kakvu regulaciju niti društvenih medija, niti interneta, jer to može samo da nam donese mnogo gore stanje, a mislim da treba da budemo srećni da sloboda izražavanja za koju smo se toliko dugo borili je, kao što sam rekla, nije apsolutna, ali dosta dobro se borimo da ona ostane tako neprikosnovena.
Hvala Nevena na ovom odgovoru. Zamolila bih posle i sve vas da se možda osvrnete i u završnim vašim izlaganjima prokomentarišete i Irinino pitanje i Nevenin odgovor. Ja ću samo pročitati, imamo jedan još komentar i jedno pitanje. Jedan od naših gledalaca je rekao, pogledajte kako sajtovi vlade koriste za promociju ministara, nigde dokumenta na prvoj strani, samo aktivnosti i to je pitanje uređivanja vesti vlade. S druge strane, stalno se govori o novim e-uslugama vlade, a nigde nema ni reči kako obrazovati veliki broj stanovnika, pogotovo starijih, kako da koriste svoja prava i usluge preko interneta. Kultura odgovaranja na primedbe date preko sajtova ne postoji. Da, onaj feedback format, to je jedan od naših gledalaca primetio i ide u skladu sa onim što smo razgovarali. A Lola Paunović pita Paula iz EPC-a pitanje. Paul, you could maybe read it out in Q&A. It's maybe better than if we use the translation. Ali evo ja ću da isto okvirno da prevedem. Znači, iako je sloboda izražavanja bilo veliko i korisno sredstvo i alat, da kažemo, organizacijama civilnim društvima, time što je dozvolila da otvoreno kritikujemo ili da pozivamo na određenu akciju. Kako mislite da bi ovaj novi način širenja informacije, kako je on uticao na način na koji funkcionišu nevladine organizacije, odnosno organizacije civilnog društva? Eto, to je pitanje za Paula, konkretno Paula Bučara, a mi ćemo onda ću dati nakon toga završnu reč svim gledalcima i završit ćemo onda najkasnije do 11:15. Hvala svima što ste ostali sa nama i na ovom strpljenju.
Thanks, Sena. I will answer the question first, and then I will give my concluding remarks because I have a few. Absolutely, I think that the internet and social media has totally changed the landscape that civil society organizations operate in, partly for the better and partly for the worse, maybe. At EPC, we did a project earlier this year where we were interviewing civil society organizations all over EU member states and to see how they operate and what challenges they have faced. And it was very clear that the internet is a totally new way for them to reach out and to get people involved and to reach demographics that they maybe weren't able to reach before, particularly young people. But it all depends on how well they can use those tools. It takes a bit of skill to use social media effectively, and it's something that basically every communications team needs to learn anew and keep learning because it develops very quickly. Maybe a few years ago you could do all of your campaigning on Facebook, but today if you're using Facebook but you're not using Instagram, then you're missing lots of younger people, for example. And it's also true that some of the regulatory things that we've been talking about today, some of the ideas for regulation and some of the things that aim to counteract disinformation can sometimes also have an unintended bad effect on the ability of legitimate advocacy or political actors, including civil society organizations, to operate. For example, Twitter has stopped all political advertising on its platform. And that was because political advertising was often used in a kind of manipulative way, or was used to show one set of messages to one people and a different set of messages to different people, and it, has lots of kind of problems and challenges that arise because of that. But at the same time, the definition of political advertising is huge. And it effectively meant that civil society organizations that have some kind of political aim or even just policy advocacy position could no longer use Twitter to advertise. EPC used to promote our event using Twitter. We can't do that anymore. Or we can still use Twitter to do it, but we can't pay for wider promotion. So absolutely, it has had an impact and continues to do so. And this is one of the reasons why the approach to trying to combat harmful material online needs to be super sensitive in order not to infringe on freedom of expression or on the ability of, let's say, legitimate political actors to operate. And then the question is, what is legitimate? Who decides? Which maybe leads into my concluding remarks. I first wanted to come back to a couple of things that the other panelists said, in particular what Victor just said about the context of COVID. This is really important, and I'm glad that you mentioned it. When COVID first hit, lots of people were going online trying to find out what was going on. People were looking for answers. It was a very sort of high information demand period. But there were no answers because we didn't know exactly where the virus had come from. We didn't really know how it was affecting us or what the future would look like. And that meant that it was a perfect landscape for disinformation and conspiracy theories to spread. And not only because it was being pushed maliciously, but also because people just wanted to know what was going on. And so people were sometimes spreading things without checking them properly. And I think in that context, it's interesting to see how some of the social media platforms changed the way that they present material in that kind of environment. For example, every year on the 1st of April, Google has an April Fool's joke where they have something on the homepage which tries to trick people, and it's a bit humorous. They didn't do that this year. And I think the reason for that was that it was clear that there was a more serious situation going on, and it wasn't the time to joke about tricking people. What Twitter have been doing, and I think Facebook is going in a similar direction eventually, is that they don't block material, they don't delete it or remove it if it's false, because, as we mentioned, who decides what's true and what's false? But they do flag up material if it has the potential to cause harm. And I think that this is the distinction that should be made. You know, the stuff about COVID could potentially have health consequences. A lot of the rather controversial policies that they've had towards Donald Trump's tweets, for example, that's been mostly on the understanding that the political situation in the US is so intense that some of these tweets could actually encourage violence or social unrest or otherwise cause some kind of public harm. That is why they're being flagged up, and not only because they are not accurate. You know, obviously we want to know whether we're seeing accurate information or not, but I think that that really needs to be the responsibility of journalists and media, and the role that social media platforms can play is basically just to flag something up and say, like be careful. We all need to have responsibility here. Check what you're reading. And I think that that is a relatively positive development, but there's still plenty of scope for it to go wrong. So we will see what happens.
Hvala, Paul. Može sada drugi Paul. Paul, Henri Prese, za tvoju završnu reč za danas.
Yes,
Malim?
Okay, thank you very much. As a conclusion, I just wanted indeed also to answer to Irena's questions, which was framed as how do you do to basically to protect, how do you do to fight disinformation practically now that especially young people, as she referred to, don't watch any other news source. And I just would like to, first of all, to recall that there is already let's say disinformation is not a new thing. It has existed for centuries. Manipulative attitude on media is centuries old as well, and there is already a legal framework that exists in every country on how you can fight this, how you can fight defamation, bullying, lies about yourself. It's so. If young people feel that they have the right to bully others online because they are hidden and they are not there physically, if they feel comfortable giving health advice that comes from the top of their mind, to do it, there are ways to, these people can be prosecuted in most countries. I don't know exactly for, I mean, we cannot say which framework of each country. So there are tools and they have to be aware of it. You cannot say, you even on the internet already now with the existing legal framework, you cannot say whatever you want. You can be prosecuted. Of course, the idea is that this legislative framework, it was built at a moment when there was maybe nationwide 100 media that could speak. And now media is basically each individual social media account is a media. So much more difficult to go through each every one of them, check everything and enforce your rights. It's more difficult to find the person, etc. So this is why you have other tool. One of the tool that the European Union has pushed, and this is where I would also concur to what Nevena, Victor, Paul have said, that it cannot be for a state to act as a censorship or to say what is right and what is wrong. And so the key word for the EU is self-regulation, as it exists for other media. In Serbia, for example, you have the Press Council, which deals with reviewing printed media, but also online media, not social media, but online media, as an organization which combines publishers, writers, together, and which monitor media and can address recommendations, complaints, etc. And that's the direction that the EU has taken by having this code of conduct for social media with advertiser and social media owner. and which is regularly, it was a new thing, so it's regularly being assessed. And there was an assessment a few months ago which shows that some positive things happening, some negative. So basically, it's a sphere which is still being built. So this self-regulatory aspect is being developed, is being assessed, but has to be part of the answer. And the final one that I see, so first the legal framework, the secondly is the self-regulation, and the most important one is media literacy that we talked about already, to be able to empower people themselves to navigate better through all of the information that they tackle. In the same way that you cannot trust everything that your friend or relatives or people you don't know in the street will say. It's the same for news. You have to recognize, get the source, what are the motivations, why I'm getting this information. And this is valid for every generation, from younger to elder population. And it's a very important area on which EU is working. EU and Serbia is working together. And maybe before concluding, I just wanted to reply to one of Paul's first comment. He said that he was sorry that Scotland bet Serbia. I just wanted to say that here, I mean, the Serbian national team on Twitter denied that it lost. So I don't know where you get your information from, but this is denied. And in Serbia, we're going to the European Championship for what we are concerned.
As we know, you can't believe everything that you read on Twitter, right?
Exactly. Hvala, Paul. Viktore, Nevena, prvo Viktor, ako može malo da samo kratko.
Da, htio bih samo da se možda dam neki zaključni komentar. Ono što iz ove naše perspektive komičara, to jest perspektive ljudi koji pravimo ove lažne vesti, možda je jedna od onako najbitnijih stvari koje smo naučili tokom svih ovih godina, koje smo slučajno naučili zapravo, jeste kako proveravamo vesti i kako sada nekako se trudimo da svima ostalima kažemo kako to da rade. Možda je malo kontraintuitivno, ali da bi, na primjer, neka vest na njuzu uspela, da bi neka šala uspela, naravno neophodno je da budemo i mi duhoviti, ali pored toga neophodno je da vest koju obrađujemo na njuzu, dakle ta prava vest, zapravo bude prava. Znači da mi sami u startu ne nasednemo na neku lažnu vest, inače ovo što radimo gubi smisao. I tokom ovih 10 godina prilično smo se onako izvežbali, mislim da se možda jednom ili dva put desilo da obradimo vest za koju smo mislili da je prava, a za koju se kasnije ispostavilo da nije bila tačna. I ono što se desilo je da smo razvili taj neki mehanizam, iako retko ko od nas je novinar tamo, ali smo nekako svi postali istraživački novinari u smislu da sada nam je zabavno da proveravamo da li je neka vest tačna ili ne, i sada u startu imamo taj neki mehanizam, ja volim da ga nazivam mehanizam teoretičara zavere, jer smo verovatno od njih to pokupili, a možda smo ga i nadogradili, tako da smo sada i gori od teoretičara zavere, a to je da u startu ne verujemo ničemu što vidimo. To je možda malo kontraintuitivno, ali eto sada ja mislim da nam je prirodni refleks da kad god vidimo neku vest, bilo na TV-u ili na internetu čak, ili u štampanom izdanju, a to je da u startu ne verujemo da se to desilo i onda tražimo neki dodatni izvor, što zapravo ne zahteva mnogo truda. Ljudi misle da sada kao mi radimo neko, ne znam nija kako, istraživačko novinarstvo ili novinarstvo uopšte, ali to je zapravo ide jako brzo. I eto, taj neki filter teoretičara zavere koji ne veruje ničemu, u prvoj sekundi kada nešto vidi, pa makar to došlo i od vašeg prijatelja ili od rodbine ili ne znam nije od koga, ili bilo koliko da ima komentara ili lajkova ili šerova, naš prvi refleks ili instinkt je da ne verujemo i da malo razmislimo. Tako da to je jedina odbrana koju smo do sad onako, ne mogu kažem smislili, ali razvili godina. Ne znam koliko može da se primjeni, ali ako se setite malo da kao možda bude zabavno da istražite da li je sve što saznate tačno ili ne. Posle nekog vremena postane onako prirodno. Tako da, eto, pokupite ono najbolje od teoretičara zavere.
Hvala na ovom savetu, mislim da nije ga ni teško toliko primeniti, kao što kažeš. Nevena, tvoj završni komentar.
Pa, evo, kao poslednja, nije lak zadatak, svakako bi se zahvalila svim govornicima i apsolutno složila sa svim što je do sada rečeno. I evo, da se nadovežem na poslednje što je rečeno i što je Viktor rekao, jednostavno mislim da svaka individua i svaki građanin treba da pronađe neki mehanizam, da li je to iz perspektive teoretičara zavere ili nečega drugog. Ja isto imam sopstveni mehanizam kad, na primjer, moj muž mi kaže nešto, ja kažem koji je izvor? Onda on se oseti ugroženo. Ja kažem sigurno je B92, u zavisnosti od toga šta je. I onda tako čovek filtrira i pronalazi tu neku međuistinu. Mislim da stvarno treba da se fokusiramo da na ovakvim događajima, na raznim drugim, u zavisnosti od perspektive i pozicije u kojoj se nalazimo, da širimo što bolje i edukujemo sve oko nas i mislim da je to zadatak svih od nas pojedinačno, da bismo se što više medijski opismenili i da bi nam bilo lakše da samo razumemo okruženja, a zatim i sve ostalo.
Hvala Nevena, ovo je bila, ja mislim, vrlo efektna završnica. Hvala svima vama na učešću, hvala Irini posebno, hvala vama gledalci i slušalci što ste ostali sa nama, iako smo 25 minuta prekoračili vreme, nije lako o svemu ovome razgovarati u sat vremena očigledno. Nadam se da se vidimo nekom boljom prilikom i nadam se da ste nešto i naučili, odnosno da ste bogatiji malo nakon ove naše diskusije. Pratite naš rad i puno vas pozdravljamo.